So a very good morning to you all this morning. I'm graced with the presence of some wonderful individuals from the industry who are kindly going to discuss with us whether the current darkness of COVID will be the dawn of an innovation renaissance within the hotel industry, and will the hospitality rulebook be soon replaced with an e-manual. So allow me to introduce you to our lovely guest this morning. So we have Luai, who is the head of hospitality at SRG Holding. He is accompanied by Amin, the head of aviation and hospitality at Facebook, Khaled, the chief executive officer at KG and Co Hospitality, and last but not least, Naji, corporate vice president of projects at Rotana Hotels. So good morning to you guys. I hope you're all well and keeping well under the circumstances.
Not bad. Surviving.
Surviving. So thank you all so much for joining us this morning. I know there's a huge, keen interest for what you guys have to say and for your views, essentially. So to kick us off, let's briefly touch base on what is happening in and around your worlds, and especially your working worlds. Is COVID affecting you, and what initiatives are you implementing to tackle an uncertain future beyond COVID? So I thought, Naji, if you could kindly kick us off.
Hi guys, hi everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for this invite. I mean, to be honest, I think it has struck everybody by surprise. But as the weeks passed, we started organizing ourselves better for the short term and maybe hopefully for the long term. I mean, I would like to say that, I mean, to some extent, you cannot predict what's going to happen, how it's going to evolve, how this thing is going to unfold. And there are things that will be trends for like the immediate effect of COVID-19 to bring back the confidence of whoever is going to be your guest or your client or your partners. And then there's, of course, on the long term, whatever is going to be the new normal, knowing that, you know, once you get hit, when you get slapped once, you learn how to react differently than when you don't. When you don't know. There's a lot of innovations that were already in the pipeline in many industries, especially in our industry. I think to some extent we used to enjoy them in the shows and you know, like clap and like, you know, wow, all these innovations, and then go back to the office and say maybe the next one, maybe the next one. I like to think about this as we deal with sustainability already. I mean, if you think about how many sustainable projects you develop, even in 2020, you would be surprised. I mean, because of the cost associated with it. So, I mean, there are a lot of immediate actions that we are taking and that we will take once we start opening up more and more. And I mean, these will have to cover, of course, hygiene, cleanliness, bringing back the trust, showing our guests that we care and that we are taking measures. I mean, one thing that struck me in one of the articles I read recently is that they say instead of cleaning your hotel at night, start cleaning it during the day, you know, and show people that you're actually cleaning. I mean, usually you see people, the staff cleaning the hotel public areas during the late hours of the night, and this is already a sign that you actually care and that you are already taking a lot of measures to make this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's easy to tackle things when you know it's coming, and obviously nobody kind of saw this coming for sure. So to kickstart those initiatives, like you said, that have been in the pipeline, maybe that's kind of the push that everybody's needed over the past few years. I mean, we've spoken about kind of, Naji's spoken about kind of the big hotel chain groups. Do you think this will impact hotels disproportionately?
Sorry, Abby, was that to me?
Was that, sorry?
Was that to me? Sorry.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Oh, yeah, all right. I do think that the small independents will probably be impacted a lot more. That's something that our research has been showing, in the sense that people are looking for trust. They're looking for, in the post-COVID era, they will start looking for brands that they know that they can get sort of a safe and COVID-free, hopefully, experience with. The independents will struggle to prove that to their guests, and that's one thing that platforms like Facebook and Instagram, but also in general, maintaining a good cadence of communication, maintaining a good customer connection will allow small property owners to communicate, because they're already at a disadvantage because they don't have the big brand. And what they need to do is make sure that people understand how they're taking safety, trust very, very seriously. But I think if I reflect on what Naji said, I agree that this is also accelerating digital transformation quite significantly. It's nice to hear that Naji used to attend conferences and go back to the office and it's business as usual. And I remember speaking at some of these conferences and people nodding along and then trying to sort of fix subsequent meetings to discuss your messaging strategy or how you're going to bring augmented reality into your experience. And sometimes hoteliers weren't quite ready. So I think the silver lining in this is that we will see a lot more appetite for a lot more technology to enhance the end-to-end customer experience. That's sort of what we're seeing. And to your question, both large and small players, because that's what technology does. Technology democratizes the playing field, right? And what we'll see is both small property owners and large chains having access to the same technologies. The onus is on who leverage these technologies the best.
I think I definitely agree with both gentlemen, and now since businesses are back and we've seen slowly, gradually people are going back to the workplace and getting readapted again, and we see it's not really an easy thing. But I think we're now in the stage of yes, COVID-19 has happened. We got slapped. We got taken by surprise. Unfortunately, a lot of people are got seriously impacted along the way. We've seen recent reports of business health and safety and sustainability. I think the new ambassadors of brands and guests are going to talk more about safety. Are going to talk more about cleanliness rather than potentially the standards, which will evolve as we go along. The standards will come back slowly, but I think definitely number one priority will be health and safety. And we've seen a lot of the big powerhouses and the big companies and giants are really accelerating in putting the message out and putting the message across. Some of them got criticized because people were thinking, so you were not really cleaning properly beforehand. But I don't think it's the case. I think it's taking it to a next level where it promotes the assurance and the insurance and create resilience as we go along. So definitely health and safety, in my opinion, will be the number one issue to tackle and get along with as a step one as we go along. So it's now thinking more of pre and post vaccine rather than COVID itself. So what are the steps are we going to take? Pre the vaccine 100% coming out, and post the vaccine, how will these norms change, and what's going to be accepted, what's going to be expected, what's going to be here to stay? I think a lot of questions and reimagining of how it's going to look like. It's flying all over the place. There will be a lot of learning for us as we go along. It's going to be a rethinking process. We have to, think how the consumer is going to react. I read the other day an article about one of the hotels in the US reopened, and the expectations were the guests are going to check in. They don't want anybody to come to the room. They just need a clean room, and that's it for a couple of days. But on the contrary, these guests, they ask for the rooms to be cleaned twice a day, which is a good sign. I think people are going back, and they trust these brands. And they trust these powerhouses that, whatever they're saying they're doing is definitely impacting, their way of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously cleanliness and digitalization, they kind of almost come hand in hand. So Luai, do you believe that digitalization removes the valuable human touch, especially in the hospitality industry? And if so, do you think it could enhance a guest experience? What are your views on that?
Thank you, Abby. It's a good question. Honestly, dealing with a lot of hoteliers and, throughout the years, there's been this perception indeed that technology takes away, from the human touch or the human aspect of our business. And to some extent, that's, partly true. Especially in the past, when you're looking, at limited service hotels and how soulless they can be, I can see that point, especially, from the kind of old school hoteliers who've been used to, really emphasizing personalization, human touch, and, recognition factors. But if you look at precisely those factors, hospitality is about recognition, and it's about, knowing who the guest is. It's about also, personalization. It's about, managing expectations. All of these things, I think today, technology will help us gather the right information about the guest, know who the guest really is and what their expectations are and what's important to each one of them. And, you can go from simple things, input by the guest, at the check-in process or at the booking process, right up to really advanced, things like artificial intelligence and facial recognition and things of that nature. And, all of these things, in my opinion, we don't have a choice anymore. The technology has reached a point where it's really going to enhance the human touch and direct the human touch and make it more focused and make it more accurate. We're not saying remove it by all means. I'm just saying remove the ungenuine part. We all hate that, right? Just standing there and asking a robotic or a meaningless question. For me, I'd rather deal with a robot, honestly. And I think I'm not alone. So the whole idea about technology is how we're going to integrate that into the kind of process so that we know the guests better, we know what their preferences are, what's important to each one of them. Going back to what a lot of the gentlemen said, some people want their room cleaned twice, right? Some of them don't want any cleaning because they don't want anybody going in the room. And we've seen initiatives like the Room Seal by Hilton and all these people to make sure that no one has entered the room. So all of these variables, and we've seen it generally. I mean, in all of us have friends who, who are extremely cautious, who are now extremely kind of paranoid about health and safety. Some of them are less. So all of that, in the end, it varies. And I think technology will help us get a better understanding.
I mean, if I can continue what Luai started, I agree. I mean, we all travel for business, and if you are looking for hospitality and the hospitality smile, it will start fading out when you spend 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes at the front desk trying to make them understand what you want, what you need, giving them your passport copy and all that. And I mean, if you see initiatives around the world, and again, stuff that we are starting to look into as a hospitality group, there's a lot you can do at the transfer from the airport to the hotel. You are in a taxi that's from the hotel itself. Any information you want from the guest, you can gather it on the way to the hotel. You don't need to wait until they are at the desk to ask them all the remaining questions, let's say. The online check-ins, the instant check-ins, there's so many technologies that can make this arrival contactless. And if you want to smile to the guest, then he will accept and appreciate your smile much better. Face recognition is something that is interesting. And the fact that all these technologies have been already there, whether startups or established companies, makes us wonder. Maybe, I mean, sometimes maybe you need someone to push you of the edge, to take a decision on things. And not all the technologies, I mean, something I would like to say here, not all the technology you're going to develop are going to cost and are going to cost a lot. There's a lot of retrofitting that can be done to adapt your hotel to trends that will make the guest more confident about the health and safety measures you're taking, more, let's say, willing to come back. Because again, now we're not talking about bringing them back to our hotel versus another hotel. We are actually talking about bringing them back to any hotel. And this is a big difference, It's like, someone said that there are two types of people, the social animals that will come back anyway. And there are the people that are probably the majority that are very worried after something like this, especially that now, unfortunately, with the media, you can see the numbers by the minute, I'm sure everybody has this graph of the coronavirus, numbers, and we all check it every morning and afternoon and refresh it. And this is really concerning. And if we don't take the right measures everywhere, and I think we should start zooming into like area by area where we see things happening. And like one big question mark, although it's funny, but the elevators, someone said we should have someone inside the elevator cleaning, and then somebody else said you should have some technology that sprays something on the buttons every time someone goes up and down. One technology that I like very much that is not implemented in a lot of buildings, not even hotels, is so controlling the hotel lift from the ground floor itself. So you access the ground floor, you choose your floor, and then you just shoot up to that level. This means that you have actually much less buttons, especially in towers. You can control how people are accessing, and you can actually clean 5-6 pads and you're done. This, it's funny, before we used to probably let our kids play with the elevator buttons if they look at the button panel, you're scared.
I have that in my office, actually.
So this is something that is already there, and that we just need to, if possible, retrofit, and if not, consider for anything new, because it's helpful. Of course, online invoicing whenever you check out. A good example of that I saw somewhere. They say the closer you get a hotel into an Apple Store experience, you're almost there. If you notice what happens in Apple, of course you get to test some of their products, but to some extent it's seamless. You stand there, you talk to someone, he's playing with a pad in front of him, you get your order done, you get an email on your way out, and you're sorted. You have received the smile, you have received the attention, but it's there.
It's seamless. I just want to add one thing, if I may, on that, Naji. Thanks a lot. I mean, just if you want to look a little bit more technical into the guest journey process, we've spoken a lot, many of pre-arrival, things and all of that. One of the bottlenecks of seamless check-in, especially in the UAE, we had with the passport scanning, right? This
Yes.
process that, in a lot of countries and a lot of places that has kind of went completely seamless throughout the check-in, check-out journey, we've notoriously had to deal with this issue of, having to scan the passports and verify the person and all of that. And I think that has been a bottleneck, and many hotels wanted to do that, and then they reached that stage and then they stopped. And I think with everything that has been happening now, that is driven by and by all these kind of health and safety measures, I think we'll see more incentive or motivation by these kind of government officials to look at this process and look at this kind of stage in the journey in a more seamless way, and how we make it better, and learn from places like Singapore and so on that had similar issues and have overcome those issues. Because the mobile key is there, the technology, as Naji said, everybody said, the mobile key. You don't have to actually touch anything if you really look at the journey, minimize the journey. Yes, hello, welcome, Mr. Whatever, and by technology we can even know the people where they are, if they're arriving to the hotel, where they're coming from, how long they're staying, even things like where they're working and all of these things, and ask them relevant questions or cater the service to them, as I said in the beginning about knowing the guests. And if we combine that with the technical aspect, then I think the guests will welcome that.
I'd like to follow up on that, actually. Thanks, Saeed, because I think the beginning of the question where we discussed whether the human touch is essential or whether technology can sort of replace or augment or displace that, I think it's going to be a hybrid. I think ultimately it's going to be a hybrid experience where you have technology aspects and you have human elements. And what we need to do, or how we need to think about the customer journey as an industry, is we need to let the customer decide what and where they want to interact with, basically. So let's say, it's typical to get a random knock on the door during this stay for turn down service. Or it's very normal to, go out into the hallway, probably with a t-shirt and running out and putting your tray and running back into the room. Those types of experiences sort of need to go away. You need to be able to sort of very seamlessly tell the hotel what you expect, when you expect it, and how you want it delivered. And when we're able to do that, suddenly we're able to personalize the service. So the person who wants the room cleaned 3 times a day versus the person who wants his room untouched for 3 days. Those are 2 different cases that we need to tailor to. So I think the more responsive we can make the customer experience, the better the customers will feel about our brands and about the overall stay. So what technology will enable us to do is to tailor that. So if someone really wants to say hello to a human at check-in and give them their passport and spend 5 minutes chit-chatting about the weather or where they've come from or why they're in the city, we let them do that. But if they just want to get on with it, go to their room, use their smart key in the elevator, use their smart key at the door, not talk to anyone, and leave that hotel versus the technology.
Even once they are in the room, I mean, things like Alexa and Siri integration and things like that. We've seen articles about how hotel people or hoteliers now are disinfecting high touch points in the room, and AC controls and remote controls go into a sealable bag, and all of these things. Actually, if you design a hotel now from scratch and with Alexa, things like Alexa in place, you can just take all of that out the window and just have a more of a, as Naji said in the very beginning, we've seen these in kind of exhibitions and seminars, say, okay, nice, but then maybe not. But I think now with this crisis, we're forced to change, and this is where a lot of the complacency and the un-innovation that we've seen in hotels previously, we're forced to change, and we're forced to look at these systems now because the guest expectations have changed.
We've obviously touched on kind of the check-in and then as soon as the guests get to the room. But as far as you guys are concerned, how do you see kind of the end-to-end journey? Obviously, there's kind of periods between check-in and there's obviously kind of dining and all of the rest of it concerned. How do you see that being affected?
Look, if I may take that. Look, definitely automation will gain currency as we go along. And at certain stage when we were developing hotels and building hotels and looking at new ideas when it comes to technology, there was always a scare of technology, whether from a user interface and would people be able to use it. I think we've passed this stage already. You see now, because like Luay just mentioned, there is a necessity. So now you see grandparents who are using Zoom, who are meeting their family on Zoom, and they know how to switch it on, they know how to log into a meeting and share screens and what have you. So I think there is a necessity. So going back to that, I think a lot of developers and owners will sort of calculate the ROI on an investment in a tech-enabled building. So what and versus the lost opportunities if they don't do so. So there is a need, there is a necessity, there is a user interface that's much more simple to get adapted to all across the journey of the customer. So I think the way the investment in tech, whether it's a cloud-based or whether it's on property, you know, it's going to be something that we're going to see a lot of, because a lot of developers will rethink, will I lose business, or there are lost opportunities if I don't do so, versus, you know, value engineering certain tech initiatives or tech-enabled you know, initiatives within a development or a construction. So I think definitely automation will gain currency as we go along.
Khalid, if I may comment on this, my problem all the time with developers and consultants comes from the fact that they always come to the developer and tell him, your building is going to cost you X and it's going to cost you X plus Y if you add sustainability and technology. And directly the client is kind of anchored to the X, doesn't think about the rest. He's like, okay, so it's going to be X if I don't do all the fluffy stuff. So let's do the X only. And this is, I think you should present the case now to the developer as a whole, like the whole answer, the whole solution. You should not tell him this is what you get and this is what you get if you add to it sustainability and innovation measures. And again,
Totally.
Abby, to answer your question, I mean, there's of course, there's a lot of touch points and touch areas where the guests will, where we want actually the guests to be. You know, we want them to come and dine. We want them to use our meeting rooms and centers. But again, you see, if I tell you that I can predict the future, I would have known about coronavirus and told everybody else. But all we can do is find ways to push people our way and to tell people that we care and that we are taking measures. I've seen a lot of things, and we are debating this already since a couple of weeks now internally. We have a committee that's looking into all the possible solutions that are in the immediate term, on the short, medium range, and then for the long term, and differentiating between things that will cost a lot of money and that will that we need to spend time on, and things that we can do as quick wins and things that we can fix immediately. I mean, if you consider the dining experience, if I can just dive into this a little bit.
Yes,
there are a couple of things that we actually do automatically as operators and as hospitality people. You have to have, every time you design a new restaurant, you have to select the salt and pepper shakers. You know, for that restaurant, you have to put this, you have to put that. I don't think anybody has ever thought of the hygiene part of things. And I'm sure the guest is the same. I mean, the guest, when they come in, if they don't steal the salt and pepper, they touch it like 300 times. You know, if it's nice, they probably steal it. I've seen a nice report that was developed by 10 or 11 designers in the UAE that are quite like, you know, the let's say the talk of the town in terms of hospitality designers, and they have laid it out into 9 aspects. So in the dining experience, of course, layout and spacing is one important aspect. Here I have to say something. It will be spaced out for a while, but this is not a dining experience. At some point, we're going to have to go back to the crowded restaurants. This is part of the experience. You don't want to go to a clinic type of experience unless it's designed that way. Every other restaurant will have to have this warmth, will have to have this see and be seen atmosphere. We go to Zuma because we want everybody to see that we are there, and everybody else is doing the same. It's a social happening. It's not, we don't go to Zuma to dine. We don't go to Zuma to enjoy a cocktail. Of course, they talk about contact light experiences. So whatever is fluffy, whatever you don't need to do, you don't need to touch the guest on his way in or come and ask him a question, give him maybe the menu. You can have a QR code, send them the menu on their mobile phones. Everybody has a mobile phone now. I mean, you can do that easily. Of course, there are different types of people, as we said, that we will need to address. There are the social animals. We will never have to do anything about that. They will be waiting like they were waiting in front of one of the bars recently in Dubai, if you heard the news. A lot of discussion on materials. So there's antimicrobial materials that can be used and that can be adapted. So now with the technology, you can retrofit a lot of the material in your restaurants, in your public areas, and this will allow you to control and to kind of sort out the virus, most of the viruses, let's say, infections. Again, somebody said it's a matter of so in addition to health and safety, you need to understand that people have been staying at homes for a couple of months now, and maybe for a couple of months more. They will not be able to travel for a couple of years maybe, and while we are taking good care of all these sanity.
Don't say that.
No, I mean, I'm just being maybe realistic, maybe a little bit pessimistic, but I'm getting to something nice actually at the end. Just wait. Basically, what we are trying to say is that if you don't give them an interesting and nice experience when they come to your hotel forward, you're not giving them anything. I mean, you see, that's already a good example, probably. So basically, the hotel.
I had to mute, guys. Sorry.
No worries. Hotels have a duty to still maintain this experience, this nice experience of going to a dining, to a restaurant, of going and dining out with friends, and we have a duty to make this happen.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of excitement, and people are very kind of nervous, and it's anticipation as far as kind of going back to old ways as such, as far as kind of, like you said, dining is concerned. So as far as future projections, guys, how do you see things moving forward? Amin, would you like to kick us off? Like, how do you see things kind of evolving over the next few weeks, few months?
Sure. So I mean, we're working very closely with all our clients to support them on their sort of short-term needs. There's a lot of projects we have around messaging. How do we support customers, especially in hospitality and aviation, because there's so many cancellations, so many changes, that messaging becomes a very, very effective channel to deal with. On the sort of medium to longer term, the short answer is I think no one knows. So we have an internal task force that's meant to sort of do some scenario mapping for what will unfold in the industry. And to be honest, every day we have new data points that fundamentally alter our analysis. Every day we are looking at the industry in a whole new light, both from a sort of business model, cash flow, typical P&L analysis approach, but also from a consumer trends, consumer behaviors, consumer expectations perspective. And those two lenses, when you combine them, sort of start giving you a sense of what's to come, which we've touched upon here today in terms of expectations for cleanliness, for sanitation, expectations for more flexibility from brands. So that's one thing we've seen. They want brands that will reassure them. They want brands that will provide them experiences that they can trust, etc. But put that aside, we don't know when and how that will exactly unfold, and what the final shape of the industry will be when we reemerge. We're also looking at there's a lot of talk about data from China showing, a slight uptick in travel bookings and in sort of the movement in the travel industry. Even that is sort of very muted. It's come back down again. So the shape of what will happen after is very difficult to predict. As Naji said, if we could predict the future, we would have not been here. But I think overall, directionally, the trends we've discussed today are what we see happening. Definitely, to go back to the business side of things, definitely there's a huge focus on rationalizing costs. So that's everything across the customer journey will have to be rationalized with an ROI attached to it that is very clear. property development will have to be rationalized even more. There's going to be a sort of a big consideration in the industry around where and when it is best to spend each dollar and how we can maximize returns on that dollar. Now, we think, our perspective at Facebook is that technology can be a big factor in how you become a lot more efficient, how you become a lot more responsive. That's generally our perspective, and that's what we're working with brands on a day-to-day basis to achieve. I wish I could tell you, in September, things will be back to 72% of what they were last year or something like that. But that data is unfortunately not available at all.
Yeah, no, I completely, if I can jump in here, in my role as an asset manager, you can really see that, the sensitivity of hotels in general is because mainly in this region, especially, is because of the high proportion of fixed costs, right? We all, I can tell you that energy, for example, is just it's probably the second biggest cost in hotels, and there's nothing you could do about that. And even if we've seen in cases where you shut down the hotel and you still have to pay, $100,000 a month just as an energy bill as a chiller. And what Naji was saying about these technologies like the guest room management system, where it has been kind of an option, it will no longer be an option, because at times like this, and especially during low occupancy periods, forget crisis. Even summers where occupancies go down, if you don't have this, you're just going to end up spending 15% of your revenue on an energy bill, and that's just not the way we can continue. Things like variable chillers are going to be mandatory. Where we call them VFDs, and things of that nature can no longer be an option. Another fixed cost is the manning, and how we man the hotel and how we structure the manning of hotels must change. We've been into kind of a legacy operation. It hasn't really changed for the last 50 years with the way we man the hotels, and this has to change. And developers or hotel owners, the expectations of hotel owners towards brands and towards operators will also change, and we expect more innovation when it comes to manning, and maybe looking at the fixed cost portion and looking at how casual manning can play a part, and looking how companies like Marriott or Hilton possibly have an opportunity to have casual staff that rotates around the country, to kind of minimize cost, because notoriously casual staff are less trained. We don't like the way they're trained, and we don't like the quality of their training. And if big hotel chains take that back and maybe manage that, not only they will attract good talent, because good talent wants to work for these companies, but also they can train them the way they want to. But in terms of the cost to the owner, then it can be managed much more easily, or much more in a more flexible way. So these are the two things. Real survival in times like this going forward.
If
also,
I can follow on from that, Lou, I think another big trend that we're seeing, and it's attempts by some of our clients to variabilize a lot of their costs. So there's, again, to your point, there's a lot of fixed costs in the industry. What can we variabilize, whether using outsourcing, using technology, or unbundling our value? Because again, like you said, 50 years of the same sort of bundled value proposition. You have a hotel, the guests have access to the restaurant, the gym, the spa, the business center, the room. How can we unbundle? And that's something that was already happening with the emergence of co-working spaces, with the emergence of sort of restaurant brands that stood on their own within hotels, etc. So things were already happening where we looked, instead of an overall cost center, we looked at multiple sort of P&Ls across a sort of an integrated value proposition. We're probably going to see a big acceleration of that. We're probably going to see a lot of outsourcing of non-core activities for certain levels of hotels. We've already seen, partnerships with gyms in the neighborhood, partnerships with Deliveroo, with Uber Eats. There's a different unbundling that are happening that we will continue to see for this sort of emergence from a high fixed cost structure.
Yeah, totally agreed.
No, if I may jump in here, I think also we have to consider what is going to be accepted and expected as we move along. I think we're going to bounce back with a mindful consumerism, if you want to call it, where there will be small indulgences that it's going to grow as we go along. So I think definitely we have to adapt to that. More recently, working with a client on a lean operating model, and that was before COVID-19 hit. And obviously we got in between and we had to rethink and rework, restructuring the organization, having a few learning and test how this is going to go along, because the property kept operating and kept open. They didn't close. They had segments which were already still, in play, so they didn't have to close. And I think this period is going to be a good test to stretch and understand really what is required moving forward, and what is going to be accepted, what is going to be expected. Is it going to be a lot of do-it-yourself, that it's going to come across, most of the brands on all classes, whether it's luxury brands or affordable or resorts and yes, we are, like the gentleman all highlighted, we are a people industry, but I think looking at the combination of tech and a restructured operating model, where I love it more variable in terms of the cost. I think also this will come into the innovation formula as we go along with a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, not only in hospitality, but I think all across the board.
If I can jump in, basically what we have been doing before COVID-19 is actually kind of confirmed after COVID-19. So I'll explain a little bit more. We were already looking at collaborating with independent operators, such as Creno, for example, and we were looking at outsourcing our F&B operation. Usually, like historically, hotels used to run all of their restaurants. We realized at some point that you can do a lot more and a lot better with actual experts in hospitality, in restaurants, in the restaurants industry, and we started doing that. I think this will be enforced much faster than we thought, probably. I agree with you. I mean, I think outsourcing is the way forward. Recently, I got to meet the managing director of Kitopi, and for those who don't know, Kitopi basically it's a kitchen operation outside the premises of any hotel or any restaurant, and they are basically your kitchen partner, and they can develop your menus, they can outsource all of your menus and all of your restaurants for a outsourced cost, let's say, without you having to build a kitchen, without for you to have to staff a kitchen. And this is one of the things that I think should be encouraged and accelerated at some point. These collaborations with external entities that offload a lot of your staffing, that offload a lot of your capital expenditure in the beginning. Co-working, I think, is a great model that should be encouraged more. There's a lot of spaces in the hotels, a lot of meeting rooms that are left empty most of the time, business centers, even rooms to some extent. And there's a lot of small businesses that will be struggling to rent offices in the near future, and maybe in the longer term. And we need to support this as much as we can, because it will support our business. And I think because of this new, let's say, normal, we need to kind of look around our communities and try to work together to get out of this. We cannot get out of this on our own. Nobody can. And already today, this morning, I read that a lot of restaurants in Dubai are closing down because they cannot afford the rent. They cannot afford to be in the mall. They cannot afford to be anywhere. This is something that we need to consider. Looking at startups, looking at ideas that we were maybe snobbing. You mentioned energy, Luai. I think, for example, in our case, we had done a couple of case studies on our hotels to sort out how we can optimize energy and go for energy efficiency. And we work with a couple of good partners in the region. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the final signature to sign in all your hotels, you're like, you know what? I'm not ready to commit. Let me wait another year, maybe in the summer, maybe in the winter. I think now is the time to say all these plans that were put on hold that will eventually help you reduce your manning, reduce your costs, optimize your energy efficiency and all that have to come back to the table and should become a priority moving forward.
No, totally. I mean, going to what you said, Naji, just comment on the energy part. I mean, this is really, I mean, if I mentioned the VFD, it's a 2 million, let's say it's a 2 million dirham investment. That's going to save me 800,000 a year, right? I mean, the numbers don't lie. And I think a lot of what we're doing is also about re-education. This is why the title of this webinar was kind of, you know, a renaissance, and renaissance usually happens after dark times, and this is where I think we're going to be forced to change. I think owners and developers no longer have the option to kind of look at these things and say, oh, well, maybe or maybe not. I think everything that we've mentioned so far, a lot of it is going to be the new norm. It's going to be, if you like, I read that somewhere, hospitality 2.0. And we've been waiting a long time for this upgrade. And, you know, this crisis, unfortunately, has been, you know, also heard a lot of CEOs like Marriott and Emirates Airline, all these. This is 9/11 and the 2008 crisis combined. Okay, so this is not something this is going to be existential. And if we do not evolve, I'm afraid then, you know, if we don't deal with the specialists, as you say, if we don't do these things, and if we don't look at these things more seriously, how to minimize fixed costs and how to look at manning and how to, you know, change our expectations of operators and how to cluster management and how do we, you know, offload certain things, then it's just a matter of survival, because, you know, the numbers are going to change from an asset management point of view. The old profitability numbers are no longer going to be the same. I can assure you that all of these things will impact room profitability, where you're looking at room profitability historically at 85% of revenue, 84, 85%. I think this is going to go down, and that will surely impact the bottom line. And, you know, the old gross operating profit figures or the ratios, everything will go out the window. And I think we need to really look at resetting and you know, looking at the future in a more proactive way.
You know, one thing that struck me recently, a couple of restaurants in the UAE developed their own booking app and booking engine together. You know, they created this because they were like, okay, you know what, we need to act fast. We cannot spend on, let's say, you know, all these service charges, all these platforms. We need to do something together. In our case, in our hotels, the minute we started closing down, we started a delivery service to neighborhoods, to office towers whenever they were open, and then to neighborhoods later on when people went home. And I think these initiatives should not stop. Why does a hotel not produce delivery service to neighborhoods if they have the capacity and the kitchen? You know, buffets are going to be obsolete or maybe changed drastically. We have engines that we have, like, you know, a lot of engines, whether it's laundries or kitchens, or we have a lot of expertise that we can share with a lot of other entities and office buildings and communities. One other thing that is quite interesting is that you know, if you don't change and you keep this change and make it the new normal, you're gonna just go back and fall in the same trap. And we should not forget that business was not good already. Like, you know, we were already struggling to make ends meet before Corona. Now, if we don't act and we don't become the creative hubs of whatever hospitality.
Necessity is the mother of innovation.
Exactly.
That's all I have
Maybe
to
this
say.
is the good thing out of this. Yeah.
Gonna say
I saw a chart the other day that tracked the use of the word unprecedented on the web. And just the use of the word unprecedented is like 30 times up right now. So to your point, it's very, very unprecedented what we're going through, and it is yet to unfold.
Guys, I'm just going to urge the guys that have joined us and the participants just to send in some questions your way, if that's okay. I know we've had some before the session started, but I'm going to mention to everybody just to drop it into the chat box. Apparently we're having a few problems with the Q&A box this morning. So if any of you have a burning question for any of the panelists, then please do send them in. When they did come in beforehand, was this one? So, to Louis, how do you see the permanent impact of COVID on hotels from an operational and hotel asset management point of view? Touched on this.
Well, I think, look, I think we've covered a lot of points. Just to summarize, I think you're going to have a change. I mean, all of these changes are going to be driven by change in expectation, okay? Change in the guests' expectations, which will ultimately have an impact on how we do the business, how from an operational point of view. We've spoken about a lot of that, the cleanliness, the hygiene, the communication, how not to go dark, how to communicate with your guests, to let them know what you're doing, social responsibility, all of these things, design perspectives, all of these things we spoke about. The other expectation is what asset managers have towards the management companies, the operators as well, in terms of managing things like manning, like the structure of how a hotel is run, all of these layered positions, and the inefficiency of hotels that we see. Before it used to be kind of a discussion. It may go into kind of a debate on an annual basis with the operators. I think now, as I said, is an existential discussion. And if hotel companies don't leverage their size and don't leverage their know-how to, reduce the manning, reduce the fixed costs and the payroll and things like energy and managing energy and things like this, then owners are just gonna, find other ways or find other operators or find different from an operating point of view. All these things we spoke about, we've seen Marriott now partner with Ecolab and Diverse. You've seen Hilton announce their partnership with Lysol and Dettol and Mayo Clinic, talking about these things. They become a PR and communication tool. The world is changing. I think the big companies realize that, their existence and their share price and their attractiveness to investors or to hotel investors in general is predetermined now on how they react and what they do. If they do not react, then those ones will fall behind. The ones who do will be the most attractive to both guests and to hotel owners and investors.
Thank you ever so much. Okay, guys, the questions are coming in thick and fast. So Naji, maybe I could point this one towards you, as you've already touched on it just a few minutes ago. Nick is asking, will delivered-in partnerships become the norm in hotels in the future?
So, meaning the likes of Uber Eats and Deliveroo and all these? Is this I think in general, and of course for delivery services, for all of these services that we used to snob previously, we will need to, if we are willing to keep our staff working and busy and not create a big wave of redundancies in the coming months and years, we will need to, of course, look at all these aspects that were for us something that we don't do. So I remember we used to get requests for independent restaurants in the islands here, where Zuma is in Abu Dhabi and a few other places, and we used to snub them because we used to say this is not our line of business. I think the hospitality industry should react in a way that gets it closer to the business reality and gets it moving in the direction that everybody is going to. And yes, of course, delivery is one of them. Why not? I mean, if you enjoy a nice meal in Teatro, why not have it at home if you can, if you are on Sheikh Zayed Road? If you like our JBs in JBR and you like the menu, why not have it in JLT next door? We should be able to do this. And this is revenue streams that we didn't think of or that we snobbed, as I said. And yes, of course, it should become something.
I think. Sorry, Naji. I think I've seen something on the chat box about the cost impact of all what we discussed and went through. I think it's a very good point to touch on. I mean, I would consider the stage we're in as a complete reopening. You know, and as if we're starting from scratch, because some operations technically came to a pause, a complete pause. And I think I touched on this earlier. I think moving forward, number one, hospitality and all the developers and owners who get into that business as an asset class, I think they understand pretty well that it's not a one-time investment. Even if the hotel is still operational, there are still costs to be incurred as you go along. Obviously, business regenerate their reserves and you know, start paying for themselves. But unfortunately, the current state we're in, I would take it as a complete reopening. We've seen, like Naji said, some businesses completely out. You know, there's no way they can come back. So I think to the point I mentioned earlier, the ROI of calculating such investments on the long run versus not having such technologies and initiatives in place, probably it would be a lost battle if you don't. So I think it will turn into a cost of redoing business and getting back on our feet and getting back into you know, business as we know it gradually. I'm not saying it has to be hit right away. Innovation needs to be there, but I think it needs to be taken step by step. We discussed a lot on what are the priorities that we've seen now according to the trends and the sentiment. So health and safety is number one, tech enhancement is number two, and people, you know, wanting at this stage a less crowded places, and you know, it will evolve as we go along. So things will open up. So I think if we take it stage by stage, I see that the businesses, once we come back, they will start again, you know, reinvesting in itself. But definitely, it is something that definitely has to be considered. Otherwise, there is no turning back. There is no return to normal lives.
Thank you, Khaled. I think you've just pretty much answered Sarah's question there, so we've kind of almost killed two birds with one stone. And then the lovely Danny has messaged in. Hi, Danny, this morning. He would like to know, how do we see the startup companies and small standalone restaurants carrying on? Who would like to answer that for us, whether that's Khaled or any of the panel?
I mean, I think we touched on this before. We were already looking at working with independent and standalone restaurants to bring them into our properties. And again, I would like to use again the word snob. We used to snob these independents, thinking that we know better about food and beverage and about these operations. And now, I mean, before even Corona, we realized that these guys can bring a lot of value and they can bring a lot of knowledge to where this industry is going. And we need to collaborate. I'm not saying that we will follow them where they are and we will support them if they are renting a place in a hotel. But I think if we can at least support a couple around the region, knowing that we are present in the region and beyond, we will be able to support them and bring them into our umbrella of outlets and franchise or even manchise, which is it's a management / franchise type of model where we share the cost, we share the revenue and the profit, and we share the whole experience. So,
I think just to add on that, Abby, you know, we have to look at these independent players as partners and valuable valuable partners at that. Historically, we've looked at them in dollar signs to rent out spaces for sometimes exuberant amounts, in the sake of renting out, leasing these spaces, and then just kind of forgetting about them. And I think, especially now with the recovery and even going forward, I think we need to look at them more as a value-adding element in the hotel, rather than purely from a financial kind of aspect. That's why the adjustment in the partnership and how we do. That was a nice view, by the way.
I'm so sorry. I kicked the.
So I was saying that maybe the partnership style will go more into from a purely lease, partner kind of type, to more of a, as Naji was saying, possibly a revenue sharing or even a partnership in terms of partnering with them together, and people like spa operators are journey. We spoke about a lot of F&B, but even spas, they're super specialists. You would even got specializations within the spa, just like we have specialization within the F&B, casual dining, fine dining, bars and all that. There's specialists in each of these areas. And like spas also, we've seen so many now, different spas, nutrition focused, weight loss focused, obviously the wellness and all of that. So look, I mean, if we're gonna just kind of tell them, oh, here's the space and, do you want to rent it? I don't think that's the right way. I think it's more about, first of all, choosing the right partners for the location, for the type of guests, for all of these, making the homework and the due diligence on, who are these guys, who should we be partnering with? And second is looking at the partnership model itself and giving them a little bit of a support and kind of a head start, just to make their lives a little bit easier, especially in the beginning as they ramp up into the business.
Yeah,
I think
and we
probably
keep trying again where people keep saying that collaboration is key, and I think now is exactly that time, isn't it, where the bigger guys help out the smaller guys, and then in reverse, everybody is kept happy almost. Sorry, you carry on.
No, well, I think startups will find, because I think a lot more receptive ears
Yes.
amongst the big corporates. But I also think that startups, whether those are sort of service providers, spas, restaurants, etc., or on the technology level or on the sort of efficiency level, the ones that can survive and have enough cash to survive will be at a big advantage, because they can pivot their model. They're fairly small operations. They can find new ways of delivering that value to customers. But the trick is making sure they survive, because that's the risk they have as opposed to big corporate. And I would encourage, we've launched, sorry, I'm going to do a shameless plug. We've launched a $100 million SMB fund to help small and medium-sized businesses. The details are not out yet for the region, but it should be out in the next few months. So if there are small business attendees on the call here, I would encourage them to look into it and hopefully get some of those funds to help them survive this period.
There's a couple of questions that are quite interesting, actually, and if you don't mind, maybe just briefly, because it's something that we've seen also in the news. And so somebody says, would the larger groups take the smaller operators, or the opposite, where the smaller hotels will be innovative and grow? I think we will see both trends. I've seen this in different discussions. So one thing is sure, independent operators will come to the bigger chains and let's say, to offload all the cost and the trouble and the headache of moving forward in an uncertain time. But at the same time, if you listen to the Airbnb CEO recently, the founder, he said, because of this lack of travel or this impossible opportunity to travel, people will look around and road trips will be the next best thing. And small operators and boutique hotels, all these experience community brands will flourish at the same time, because people are more entrusting of these small boutique places. They know the owner, they know where they're getting the food from, of course, with this agro-tourism thing. So I think the trends will be both directions. We are in need of these independents as well. I mean, if you consider the projects in the pipeline of any operator at this stage, all these are going to be shifted by months, if not years. So if you don't add to your portfolio hotels that are actually revenue generating in the short term, you are in trouble. I mean, we cannot wait for our pipeline to come together generating. We need new opportunities of revenue stream, and this is a fact. So that's an interesting.
There's another question on by Bashir. A couple of questions actually about the hidden aspects in hotels, which are very risky for pathogenic virus to expand. Mm-hmm. I think we've touched on a couple of those. I mean, recently we have a couple of projects with IHG, and the first thing that they told us is that we're going to throw away that bed throw and the cushions out. No more. Meaning permanently. Yeah, so this is good news for me because I hated those things anyway. I always felt that they were kind of just ways where we can transmit uncleanliness and pathogenic stuff. So things like that, things like materials and products and, kind of hospital grade products, all these electrostatic sprayers, using the use of UV lights for things like, room keys, if room keys still exist and we don't completely move to mobile keys soon. The disinfection of high touch points, we've spoken about that. The partnership with, the experts, we've spoken about that. Even adjustments to the mystery shopper program and another question by Bashir highlighting, the collaboration of third parties to confirm compliance. All of these things are definitely going to be there, and again, they form part of the communication we use with our guests. Things like limited the screens in the front office. We've seen those in airports already. Things like temperature cameras, that we see also in airports, so that the process is not so invasive, and we check temperatures and things like this. This is also very, very important for the hotels and for our industry, that we don't do these measures in an invasive way. And when it comes to the technology part, it's also kind of an opt-in, opt-out case, so that a lot of people are worried about privacy and so on. So there's a lot of things that will change in the whole management and how we deal about everything we spoke about. And I'm glad that Bashir and others have already are asking about those.
Thanks, guys. We've had so many questions and comments come in, so I'm just going to thank you. And we're just going to finish off with one final question from Enad, who is the general manager of a large hotel in Abu Dhabi. And what he would like to know is whether adjusting the P&L approach and defining lines and also adding a contingency line, is this going to serve you better in future? And certainly in times of need. So that's kind of a nice heavy one to finish off with. So if one of you would like to help Enad in that sense.
I think it's not a bad way of looking at it. So gone from automation all over the operation, and now we're touching the P&L automation, and how we're going to look at it. I think, a lot of new norms as well in our P&Ls will start kicking in. It derives from a lot of the items we have discussed that will be, obviously we cannot change the financial systems and unified system of accounts, but it's how we account for it in the entries and how we budget and how we are crisis ready and the way we look at our reserves. And I think there will be a lot of learning as well as we go along in that aspect. I totally agree. It's an area that definitely will be looked at.
I think a lot of hotels are looking at this FF&E reserve now as a source of a backup or some kind of a support for cash flow during these tough times. And I completely understand that. And there's no way around that. That's the kind of thing that will go eventually. However, I would be also quite careful not to deplete that entirely, because all of the things we spoke about, all of the initiatives, whether it be it technology, whether it be it design, engineering. We haven't spoken about, you know, installing filters and how we deal with recycled air and HEPA filters, and a lot of things will require reinvestment, the change of materials and fabrics. All of these things will eventually carry a cost. And if we, you know, and coming out of a crisis, it's not going to be the cash flow that's going to support this. It's not going to be the GOP that's going to support this. It's going to be whatever we will fortunately have left in the FF&E reserves. You know, we can't look at those as entirely kind of a cash flow support. I'd really have maybe a longer vision in mind to see how we can manage that on the long run.
Guys, thank you so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate time, effort, views, and knowledge. And I'm sure the guys that have kind of sent in the questions and the chat requests also feel the same. I know we've run on slightly, so thank you so much for kind of participating and bearing with me and the rest of the participants this morning. But what I will do with the questions that we've not had time to answer, I'll send those through to you guys so that maybe you can reach out to the attendees that didn't have those questions answered. And thank you all so much again for your time, and hopefully we can have you back within a few weeks, and hopefully things will have changed and progressed by then, and we'll all have maybe slightly different kind of
maybe a physical meeting.
Yeah, exactly that, around the boardroom. Guys, thank you so much. Have a fantastic day. And
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Abby.
Bye.
Bye guys. Thank you very much.